The world was a fuzzy, sterile blur of white sheets and pale green walls. The rhythmic, insistent beep of the heart monitor was the only constant, a metronome counting out the seconds of my fragile recovery. My hip, a nexus of surgical steel and aching bone, throbbed with a dull, persistent pain that the morphine drip couldn't quite erase. It was in this state of forced vulnerability, tethered to tubes and wires, that my son, Brian, chose to visit. He bustled in, not with the quiet concern of a loving child, but with the feigned, overbright cheerfulness of a salesman closing a deal. "Mom, you're looking better." "Much better," he said, patting my hand with a touch that felt more like an appraisal than affection. He was wearing his best suit, a charcoal gray number he reserved for important meetings. That was my first clue. "Brian," I managed, my voice a dry rasp. "So formal." He laughed, a short, sharp bark that held no humor, just came from the office. "So much to handle, you know." He set his briefcase on the visitor's chair, the clasps clicking open with an unnerving finality. "Speaking of which, I brought something to help you, Mom, to take the stress off your shoulders so you can just focus on getting well." He pulled out a thick sheaf of papers, bound in a neat, clinical-looking folder. "It's just a power of attorney," he said, his tone deliberately slow and simple, as if explaining a complex concept to a child. "It means I can handle your bills, talk to the doctors, manage the house while you're incapacitated. It's just a formality, really, to make things easier for everyone." I looked at his face, the handsome features I had once adored, now twisted by a subtle, hungry greed. His eyes didn't quite meet mine. He was looking at the signature line. He saw a weak, sedated old woman, a confused patient addled by painkillers. He saw an asset to be managed, a problem to be streamlined. He had no idea he was looking at Helen Hayes, not just Helen Coleman. I let my eyelids flutter, feigning a wave of exhaustion. "Oh, Brian, I'm so tired. My head is foggy." "I know, Mom. I know," he cooed, pushing the pen into my limp hand. "That's why this is for the best. Just a little signature right here, and you won't have to worry about a thing. I'll take care of everything." My fingers, frail and trembling, closed around the pen. I knew what those papers really were. They weren't just for paying the electric bill. They were a key to my accounts, my investments, the home my late husband George and I had built together, a key to my life, which he intended to lock away while he plundered the vault. I let a tear slide down my cheek, a genuine tear of profound, soul-crushing disappointment. He mistook it for a tear of gratitude. With a shaky hand, I scrawled a barely legible signature. He thought he had won. I knew the real war was just beginning. As he packed the papers away, whistling softly, I closed my eyes and waited for the sound of his footsteps to fade down the hall. The silence in the room was a physical presence once Brian was gone. The only sound was the steady beep, beep, beep of the monitor, a sound I now interpreted as a countdown. The nurse had come in, checked my vitals, and adjusted my drip with a kind smile, leaving me to the quiet solitude of the late afternoon. The sun cast long, dusty shadows across the linoleum floor. It was time. On the small bedside table, next to a plastic cup of water and a box of tissues, sat my purse. And inside that purse was my secret. Not a jewel, not a hidden will, but something far more potent. It was an old, battered flip phone, a dinosaur in this age of sleek smartphones. Brian always laughed at it. "God, Mom, when are you going to join the 21st century?" He never imagined its purpose was to stay out of his century, out of his digital reach. It had one number stored in it, a number I knew by heart anyway. Summoning a strength that surprised even me, I pushed myself up, my torso screaming in protest. Every inch of movement was a trial, torso screamed. I gritted my teeth against the sharp, grinding pain in my hip and leaned, stretching my fingers as far as they could go. My hand brushed against the cool leather of the purse, and I managed to drag it closer. Fumbling with the clasp, I pulled out the phone. It felt solid, real, a weapon in my trembling hand. I flipped it open. The small screen glowed with a familiar blue light. I didn't need the contact list. My thumb, wrinkled but steady, pressed the sequence of digits I hadn't needed to dial in over 5 years, but had recited in my mind 1,000 times. A prayer for a day I hoped would never come. The phone rang twice on the other end, a crisp electronic tone that cut through the hospital hush. Then a voice, deep and precise, with no preamble. Yes? Vincent, I said, my voice still weak but now laced with steel. It's Helen. There was a fractional pause, then the voice warmed, but only slightly. It was never a truly warm voice. It was a voice built for boardrooms and depositions. Helen, I saw the hospital admission. I've been waiting for your call. Is everything all right? No, I stated, the word hanging in the air. Brian was just here. He brought the papers, the ones George and I discussed with you. He thinks he has it all. The silence on the other end was different now. It was the sound of a well-oiled machine engaging its gears. I see, Vincent said, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. So, the Hayes contingency is active? The Hayes contingency is active, Vincent, I confirmed, a wave of profound, cold relief washing over me. It's time. Consider it done, he said. There was no, I'm sorry, or that's terrible. Vincent Hayes did not deal in sympathies. He dealt in actions. Rest and recover, Helen. I will handle everything. He won't know what hit him. The line went dead. I let the phone fall from my fingers onto the blanket, the plastic clattering softly. I sank back against the pillows, the physical pain still there, but the crushing weight on my soul had begun to lift. The board was set. The pieces were in motion. The next week was a study in contrasts. Outwardly, I was the model patient. I worked with the physical therapist, a cheerful young woman named Janet, who praised my grit. I pushed through the pain, taking my first agonizing steps with a walker, each one a small victory. I ate the bland hospital food, smiled at the nurses, and projected an image of a woman focused solely on mending her broken body. Brian would call, his voice dripping with that same patronizing sympathy. How are you feeling, Mom? Don't you worry about a thing. I've already started sorting through some of the financial clutter. It's a real mess, but I'll handle it. I would just murmur my thanks, letting him believe he was in complete control. Inwardly, a different kind of healing was taking place. My mind, clear of the initial surgical fog, was sharp and focused. I thought of George, my late husband. He had been a gentle soul, a history professor who saw the good in everyone, but he hadn't been a fool. He had seen the grasping nature in our son long before I was willing to admit it. Ellie, he'd said to me one evening years ago, Brian loves what we have, not who we are. We need an insurance policy, not for us, but for you. That insurance policy was Vincent Hayes. He wasn't just some lawyer we found in the phone book. Vincent was my partner. Before I was a wife and mother, I was an architect, a damn good one. But in the 1970s, the field was a fortress of men. So, while I raised Brian and played the part of the professor's wife, I was also the silent, uncredited partner in Hayes and Associates, one of the most successful architectural design firms in the state. Vincent was the face. I was the vision. We called my involvement HH Solutions, LLC, my ghost company. All my designs, my shares, my profits were funneled into that entity, legally distinct and shielded. It was my secret world, a world George knew about and wholeheartedly supported. Secret world. He was proud of me. One afternoon, a courier delivered a simple manila envelope to my room. The nurse handed it to me, thinking it was from a well-wisher. Inside, there was no card, no flowers, just a single sheet of paper with Vincent's letterhead. It contained a few brief, typed lines. Power of attorney, contested, and nullified on grounds of client incapacitation and undue influence. Full medical evaluation supporting this has been filed. All assets held within HH Solutions, LLC have been frozen pending client's direct instruction. Preliminary audit of your personal accounts shows unauthorized transfer attempts by Brian Coleman. Blocked and documented. Rest well. The house is secure. I folded the paper and slipped it under my pillow. It felt heavier and more reassuring than any legal document Brian could ever produce. He was playing checkers, moving his pieces around a board he thought was his. He had no idea he was a pawn in a game of chess, and his queen was about to be taken off the board. Not by me, but by a ghost he never even knew existed. Each step I took with that walker felt firmer. I wasn't just learning to walk again. I was walking toward the final confrontation, my resolve hardening with every painful, deliberate movement. They discharged me 2 weeks after the surgery. Brian insisted on picking me up, playing the role of the devoted son for the hospital staff. He had a wheelchair waiting and fussed over me with a performative solicitude that made my skin crawl. Easy now, Mom. Let me get that. You shouldn't be exerting yourself. The drive home was quiet. I stared out the window at the familiar streets of my neighborhood, but everything felt alien. When we pulled into the driveway of the house George and I had shared for 40 years, the place I had designed from the ground up, I felt a deep, chilling sense of violation. Brian helped me inside, his hands guiding me with an owner's possessiveness. The air in the house was stale. My collection of ceramic birds on the mantelpiece was coated in a thin layer of dust. A stack of mail, mostly bills and junk, sat unopened on the hall table. But what truly stopped me in my tracks was the change in the living room. My comfortable, slightly worn armchair, the one perfectly molded to my shape over years of reading, was gone. In its place stood a sleek, modern leather recliner, black and imposing. What is this? I asked, my voice trembling for the first time. Oh, that old thing was a wreck, Mom, Brian said breezily, not looking at me as he set my bag down. Figured I'd get you an upgrade. It's got heat and massage functions. Top of the line. He didn't get it for me. He got it for himself. He was already redecorating, nesting in a home that wasn't yet his, like a cuckoo pushing the rightful occupant out. My home. He started talking, his voice a drone of self-congratulation. He spoke of consolidating accounts and liquidating underperforming assets, my assets. He mentioned a realtor friend who had given him a very promising preliminary valuation on the house. The market is hot right now, Mom, he said, pacing in front of the fireplace. We could get a great price, set you up in a fantastic assisted living facility, one with a pool. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. I sank down onto the sofa, the unfamiliar springs protesting. The pain in my hip was a dull fire, but it was nothing compared to the inferno of betrayal in my chest. I looked at this man, my son, and saw a stranger, a predator who had been patiently waiting for me to become weak, to become prey. Brian, I said, my voice quiet but clear. This is my home. He stopped pacing and finally looked at me, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. It's a lot of house for one person, Mom. You have to be realistic. This is about securing your future, my future, our future. There it was, his future. I simply nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. I let him see the sadness in my eyes, the weariness. I let him believe he was winning, that my spirit was broken. You're right, Brian. Winning. It's a lot to think about. He smiled, a triumphant, predatory grin. I knew you'd see it my way. Now let me get you settled. I've got a call with a financial planner in an hour to go over your portfolio. My portfolio. He walked out of the room toward the kitchen, already acting as the master of the house. I stayed on the sofa, a prisoner in my own home, gathering my strength. The quiet before the storm. For 2 days, I endured Brian's reign. He was a constant, suffocating presence, striding through my home as if he held the deed in his pocket. He took phone calls in the study, his voice loud and confident, using terms like capital gains and estate liquidation. He had brought a box of his own files, setting up a makeshift office on the dining room table where George and I had hosted decades of family dinners. He treated me with a cloying condescension, bringing me tea I didn't ask for and fluffing pillows as if I were an invalid doll. Just relax, Mom. I've got this. On the third day, the day I had been waiting for, a man came to the house. A fast-talking realtor in a shiny suit, a friend of Brian's named Brad. They walked through the rooms, the realtor pointing and making notes on a tablet while Brian nodded in agreement. Great bones, Brad said. We'll want to declutter, of course. A lot of this personal stuff will have to go into storage to stage it properly. They were in the living room discussing the curb appeal and the market value when the doorbell rang. The sound, a simple 2-note chime, cut through their conversation like a surgeon's scalpel. Brian shot an annoyed glance toward the front door. Are you expecting someone, Mom? He asked, his tone implying that I had no right to have visitors without his approval. As a matter of fact, I am, I said, my voice even. I pushed myself up from the sofa, using my walker for support and stability. Each step was deliberate. I was no longer playing the part of the frail victim. Brian sighed dramatically. I'll get it. You just sit tight. No, I said, my voice firm enough to make him pause. I will get it. It's my house, and my guest. I made my slow, steady way to the front hall. Brian and the realtor watched me, a mixture of impatience and curiosity on their faces. I reached the door, my hand closing around the cool brass of the knob. I took a deep breath, and then I opened it. Standing on my porch was Vincent Hayes. He was exactly as I remembered him, though perhaps with a few more distinguished silver strands at his temples. He was dressed in a flawlessly tailored navy blue suit, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie. He held a slim leather briefcase in one hand. His posture was ramrod straight, and his eyes, a piercing shade of blue, were sharp and missed nothing. He exuded an aura of quiet, unshakable authority. He looked from me to the 2 men standing in my living room, his expression unreadable but utterly commanding. Brian stared, his mouth slightly agape. He had clearly been expecting one of my friends from the garden club, not this titan of corporate law standing on the welcome mat. Mom? Who is this? Brian asked, his voice losing some of its earlier swagger. I smiled, a real, genuine smile for the first time in weeks. Brian, I said, turning to face him, I'd like you to meet someone. This is Vincent Hayes. I paused, letting the name hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final, devastating blow. He's my lawyer and my business partner. The color drained from Brian's face. The realtor, Brad, sensing an abrupt and hostile shift in the atmosphere, took an involuntary step backward. The air in the room crackled with sudden, glorious tension. The trap had been sprung. Vincent stepped inside, his polished leather shoes making almost no sound on the hardwood floor. He gave me a brief, respectful nod before turning his full, undivided attention to my son. The realtor, Brad Keller, fidgeted with his tablet, suddenly looking like a schoolboy caught cheating on an exam. Brian Coleman, Vincent said. His voice was not loud, but it filled the room, silencing all other thought. A pleasure to finally meet you. Your mother has spoken of you. The words sounded like a threat. Brian, recovering slightly, puffed out his chest. I'm sorry. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. My mother she's been unwell. She gets confused. She doesn't have a business partner. Vincent allowed a thin, cold smile to grace his lips. Oh, but she does. For 35 years, in fact. H Solutions, LLC. Perhaps you've heard of it? It's a multi-million-dollar architectural design consultancy. Helen, here, is the HH. She's the founding partner and majority shareholder. I'm merely the managing partner. He opened his briefcase on the hall table, the same table where Brian had let my mail pile up. He produced a single, thick document. This, he said, holding it up, is the corporate charter, signed by your mother and me in 1988. Brian stared at the document as if it were a venomous snake. That's impossible. My father was a professor. She was a homemaker. Your mother is a brilliant architect who chose to shield her success to give you and your father a normal life. Vincent corrected him, his tone razor sharp. A courtesy, it seems, you are incapable of appreciating. Most of the assets you've been so eager to liquidate, this house, the stock portfolio, the vacation property in Hilton Head, are not personal assets. They are corporate assets, owned by the LLC for tax and liability purposes. They do not and will not fall under any personal power of attorney. He then pulled out a second document. Speaking of which, this is a copy of the complaint we filed yesterday morning, officially nullifying the power of attorney you had your mother sign in the hospital. We have a sworn affidavit from her primary care physician and the on-call surgeon attesting to her medicated state, as well as digital records of your transfer attempts from her personal accounts, which constitutes financial elder abuse. You coerced her signature under duress. It is fraudulent and therefore legally void. The realtor, Brad, began backing slowly toward the door. You know, I think I have another appointment I forgot about. I suggest you stay, Mr. Keller, Vincent said without looking at him. Attempting to broker the sale of a property based on a fraudulent claim of authority could have serious consequences for your real estate license. Brad froze, his face pale. Brian was sputtering now, his face a mottled red. This is a lie, a trick. Mom, tell him he's lying. All eyes turned to me. I stood there, leaning on my walker, feeling stronger than I had in years. I looked directly at my son, the boy I had loved, the man who had betrayed me. No, Brian, I said, my voice calm and devastatingly clear. He's not lying. Every word is the truth, a truth I kept for you, to protect you, a truth you were never meant to discover this way. The living room had become a courtroom, and my son was the defendant, judged and found wanting. The weight of Vincent's revelations pressed down on him, his arrogant posture collapsing until he was slumped against the mantelpiece, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. So what? He finally spat out, his voice raw. So what if it's a company? It's still yours. It's still my inheritance. An inheritance is a gift, Brian. It is not a right, I said softly, taking a slow step forward. And it's a gift you have proven you are not worthy of. Vincent took his cue. To that end, he continued, his voice crisp and final, Helen has made some new arrangements. As of this morning, she has signed a directive to liquidate her entire stake in HH Solutions. A flicker of hope, desperate and ugly, lit up Brian's eyes. Liquidate? So, the money, Vincent interrupted, will be used to establish a new charitable entity, the George Coleman Foundation for Historical Studies. It will be endowed with nearly every cent of your mother's fortune. It will provide grants to museums, universities, and historical societies, honoring the passion of the man who was so proud of his wife's secret success. The silence that followed was absolute. Brian looked as if he'd been physically struck. The realtor, Brad, was staring at the floor, wishing it would swallow him whole. "Nothing," Brian whispered, his voice cracking. "You're leaving me with nothing?" "I'm leaving you with exactly what you tried to leave me with, Brian," I said, the pain of his betrayal hardening into a pure, cold resolve. "You saw me as a liability to be managed, a set of assets to be plundered. You didn't see a person. You didn't see your mother. You walked into my hospital room and tried to steal my life's work while I was at my weakest. What did you think would happen?" He turned on me, his face contorted with rage. "After everything I've done for you, the visits, the calls, picking you up from the hospital." "You did that for yourself," I retorted, my voice rising with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "You were tending to an investment, not a parent. You saw a frail old woman in a hospital bed, and you thought you could take everything. But you made one critical mistake. You underestimated me." Vincent delivered the coup de grace. "Furthermore, Brian," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument, "the attempted fraudulent acquisition of the power of attorney and the unauthorized access of your mother's accounts are criminal matters. While your mother, in her grace, has decided not to press charges." I held up a hand. "On one condition," I interjected, looking my son dead in the eye. "You will leave this house today. You will take your new recliner and your files, and you will not contact me again. The family lawyer will be in touch to arrange the transfer of the one thing that is truly yours, the modest college fund your father set up for you, which you never touched. That is all you will ever receive from this family. Is that clear?" He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing silently. He saw no weakness now. He saw no confusion. He saw a stranger, a woman of power and means he never knew, who had just calmly and completely dismantled his entire world. He gave a single jerky nod, defeated. The bill for his greed had finally come due, and it was a price he could never hope to pay. A month later, the house felt like my own again. The oppressive, cloying presence of Brian was gone, replaced by a profound and welcome silence. The hideous black leather recliner had been removed, and in its place, my old, comfortable armchair was back. Vincent had found it in a storage unit Brian had already rented and had it delivered. Sinking into its familiar embrace felt like a homecoming. The air was different. I had the windows open, and a gentle May breeze drifted through, carrying the sweet scent of the lilac bushes blooming in the backyard, bushes George and I had planted together on our 10th anniversary. The house was no longer a stage for a drama of betrayal. It was a sanctuary again. Vincent sat across from me, not as a lawyer, but as the old friend he had always been. The formal suit was gone, replaced by a comfortable sweater. We were sipping iced tea and looking over the final charter for the George Coleman Foundation for Historical Studies. His name, in elegant script at the top of the page, made my heart ache with a mixture of love and pride. "The first round of grant applications is already overwhelming," Vincent said with a smile. "A library in upstate New York wants to restore a collection of colonial-era maps. A university in Washington needs funding for a new digital archive. George would have been thrilled." "He would have been," I agreed, my voice thick with emotion. I looked around the sun-drenched living room, at the photos on the mantelpiece, at the books lining the shelves. Everything felt right, purified. I had not heard from Brian. As per our agreement, he was gone. I knew the silence was a gift, but it was a gift born of great pain. A part of me would always mourn the son I thought I had, the love I thought was real. But I could not live my life chained to a fantasy. He had made his choice, and in doing so, he had forced me to make mine. I chose myself. I chose my husband's legacy. I chose to turn the fruits of my secret labor into something good and lasting in the world. "Are you happy, Helen?" Vincent asked gently, his sharp eyes softening. I considered the question. Happy was a complicated word. I was not happy about my son's true nature. I was not happy about the wound he had inflicted. But I was at peace. I was free. I had faced the greatest betrayal of my life, not as a victim, but as the architect of my own defense. I had protected my home, my work, and my dignity. "I am content, Vincent," I finally answered, looking out the window at my garden, which was bursting with new life. "I have my home, I have my memories, and I have a purpose. I was no longer just a patient recovering from surgery. I was no longer a mother grieving a lost son. I was Helen Hayes Coleman, the woman who had built a secret empire, protected her legacy, and in the quiet autumn of her life had finally, fully reclaimed her own story. And that was more than enough.